still talking about football?
Yeah, about NFC North.
Then let's talk football.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Headed North, an NFC North podcast, and I'm your host, D-Tron. Look, it's been just a little over a week since we had NFL Draft 2024, and much of what I said at the beginning of my last show came true. Caleb went number one, which there was not much doubt in that, even though he isn't the best quarterback in this draft. You had J.J. McCarthy go before Bo Nix. It was a bit of a surprise that Minnesota took JJ, but I'm going to tell you a little bit later on in the show exactly why they did that and why it makes perfect sense. And then the best receiver in the draft for me, Rome Odunze, was taken at number 9 by Chicago. All of that sort of saw coming, and I went 4 for 5 out of the top 5 picks, so I actually felt pretty good about my round 1 predictions. But for today, we're going to talk about the draft picks. We're going to talk about who went to each of the 4 teams. I'll talk about some news coming out of Detroit with some big contracts for Amon-Ra St. Brown and for Penei Sewell. We'll also dig into why J.J. McCarthy is basically Kirk Cousins 2.0, and a little bit more, talk Chicago, talk Green Bay. All of that is going to come up after our sponsors for the show. So let's send it over to them. Today's episode of Headed North podcast is sponsored by Off-Rack Shop. OffRackShop.com is an online thrift store that specializes in men's and women's clothing, shoes, accessories, and more. Usually about 300 items to choose from. So if you haven't already, go to our description. You'll find a 15% off code for your next shopping trip at OffRackShop.com. All right, let's kick it off with today's first topic, and that is going to be the Detroit Lions. Now, Detroit's overall draft grade, I think we can give them a solid B+. Going into the draft, we knew Detroit needed a wide receiver, some cornerbacks, and defensive linemen. And what they do? They went and got 2 cornerbacks with their very first 2 picks. So up on my big board, we've got Terrion Arnold and Ennis Rakeshaw Jr. You got a cornerback out of Alabama. Seems that Detroit likes going to get players from Alabama now. Branch worked out for them. They had Williams that worked out for them. Jahmyr Gibbs. Hey, look, there's a pattern here. And I'm okay with that because they've all seemed to work out well for Detroit. And then Rakeshaw is actually out of Missouri. So the 24th overall pick in the first round, and then their 61 pick in the second round, they went and got cornerbacks. Went and got some depth at the offensive tackle position, getting a offensive tackle out of the University of British Columbia. In the 4th round, another 4th round pick. They went and got an interesting pick, Vakay, I'm not exactly sure how you pronounce it, but out of Utah, he played running back and safety. I'm not exactly sure what they plan to do with him because they've got Montgomery and they got Gibbs. Maybe they plan to play him some special teams, put him behind Brian Branch, see if he can play there. But it was an interesting pick. Much of the highlights that they had of him were from both sides of the ball. So it'll be interesting to see how Detroit uses him. And then they rounded out their last 2 picks with Mekhi Wingo from LSU and their last pick, Christian Mahogany? Yeah, out of Boston College. He was like their 6th round, 210th pick. He's a guard, getting some more depth on the offensive line. I think Detroit went right after where they knew they had the biggest need, and that was cornerback. I mean, it was clear to everyone who watched the game last year that Detroit needed a better secondary. They had a solid front 7 or 8, but the back end of that defense was spotty at the cornerback position for sure. So they went and got what their top needs were. They didn't address the wide receiver position, which I thought, again, you've got Amon-Ra, who they just gave this huge extension, 4 years, $120 million, but they don't really have any additional weapons. Again, James Williams, he's there, and then Donovan Peoples-Jones is there. They certainly have, the tight end position, but as far as another threat at wide receiver, potentially maybe they're going to go and maybe sign a veteran off of free agency. I don't know, man. They just didn't put a whole lot of love. But then again, they went pretty far last year with having Amon-Ra as their primary wide receiver. I just thought that with this draft, having so many receivers in it, they would have been able to go and get someone. But clearly the focus in Detroit was beef up that secondary. So now they've got 4 new folks that will likely start in the secondary at the corner position for Detroit. which should really increase the likelihood that they are not at the bottom of defensive secondary statistics come this upcoming year. Now, with all that being said, we're talking wide receivers. I mentioned it already, but Amon-Ra, 4-year extension, $120.1 million, making him the highest paid currently receiver in the league. Whoa, that's big money. But then again, Amon-Ra put up big numbers for Detroit last year, Pro Bowl style year. And right along with that, Detroit also paid Penei Sewell, 4 years, $112 million, making him the highest paid offensive lineman in the league. Now that Detroit is throwing around money to people that were picked by the current regime, the question is what about the quarterback? What about Jared Goff? Jared Goff is still pending an extension on his contract coming into his last year with the team. Do you pay him, right? What kind of dollars do you expect to give him? My sentiment or my thoughts are you give Jared Goff a 3-year, $45 million contract, and then you see what happens after 3 years. If you wait and force him to play out this year without a long-term plan, you may end up getting a really good season out of him, and then you end up got to pay him, in the mid-50s. And I don't know if I want to do that for the next 3 or 4 years for Jared Goff. If I could pay him 45, 48. I'm not saying short him. Definitely get him the money because we want him to stick around. He's done a lot for the team. But I'm just thinking that now might be a better time to sign him than waiting until next year or at the conclusion of this upcoming season. All right, so that is what we got out of Detroit. They focused on their needs in the draft. They went and got cornerbacks. And next we're going to move into Minnesota. And I want to say I gave Minnesota's draft an overall grade of a B. And here's why. They addressed the things that they needed to address. That was like bare minimum. They got a quarterback, they got a defensive lineman, and they went and got a defensive back. Those were all the things that I said in the last episode that they needed to focus on. The quarterback is where I'm going to spend quite a bit of time. Let me tell you about J.J. McCarthy and why J.J. McCarthy is just Kirk Cousins 2.0. Look, I'm going to compare their sophomore and junior seasons of college because J.J. didn't play her senior year, right? So I don't want to compare the last year numbers. Kirk Cousins played 26 games. J.J. McCarthy played 29. Kirk Cousins had 666 passing attempts. J.J. McCarthy has 654. Kirk threw for 5,500 yards. J.J. threw for 5,700 yards. Average yards per attempt, about 8.2 for Kirk, about 8.7 for J.J. The only difference or major difference in these two individuals were interceptions. Kirk Cousins in his sophomore and junior year threw 19 interceptions. J.J. McCarthy only threw 9. But they're both quarterbacks out of Michigan schools, so the Big Ten. Minnesota just basically went and got Kirk Cousins 2.0. They want someone who's going to be a game manager, but also has the ability to pass when given the opportunity, and he does that. But he is not some kind of amazing change your franchise style quarterback, at least not my opinion. And he lacks some of the experience that some of his peers have. Minnesota, I thought that they would go after someone like Michael Penix Jr., someone who has a little more experience, potentially Bo Nix, maybe a little bit flashier of a quarterback. And it looks like they went with the safe bet because that's what I feel like they got going for them is they want a Kirk Cousins style quarterback because it really fits the mode of style of play that they already have right now. They don't have to really reinvent the wheel because he can fit right in where Kirk left off. At least that's what they're expecting. One of the picks that I really liked that they went and got was Dallas Turner out of Alabama. I think that's a great pickup. With losing Danielle Hunter and all of the defensive change that they've had, this is someone who can step in and be an NFL-ready defensive player. So I think that was a great pickup. And then with their third pick, they went and got, who's this? Kyrie Jackson out of Oregon, a cornerback. Again, their top 3 needs, quarterback, lineman, D-back, and they went and addressed all of those. They also went and got a tackle, Walter Roos, a kicker, offensive lineman, and a defensive lineman with their last couple of picks. So Minnesota had a draft and their very first 3 picks, they addressed all of their top needs, and hopefully those players are going to come in and make an immediate impact. But I think, at the most important position that Minnesota has, they went and got basically the guy that they just let go to Atlanta. And now they just got him for cheaper. So I guess that's actually a win for Minnesota. Next up is Green Bay Packers. Now, Green Bay had a ton of draft picks this year. They had like 11 total, which I don't think, if I look back, Chicago had like 5. I think Minnesota had 7, and the Lions had 6. So Green Bay had almost double, in some cases, the number of draft picks that the other teams in the NFC North had. And with those draft picks, their very first pick addressed one of their top needs. So I talked about on the last episode, they needed defensive secondary, so either a DB or a safety, an offensive lineman because they absolutely lack depth on the offensive line, and then a linebacker. So with their very first pick, they went and got Jordan Morgan, an offensive tackle out of Arizona. So going immediately to the spot that they need the most help, which is protecting the quarterback and getting some depth on their offensive line. They also went and got a linebacker, again, someone that they needed, Edgerrin Cooper out of Texas A&M, and then they went and got a safety with that third pick that they have in the second round. So I thought they would go after Cameron Kitchens out of Miami. I was wrong. They went after Javon Bullard out of Georgia. It's hard to go wrong with the Georgia player at this point, honestly. You're getting them at the second round too, so you probably got a steal there. They also went and got a running back, Marshawn Lloyd, out of USC. Running backs were going awfully low this year. There was no love for the running back position coming out of the draft. I mean, it took forever for someone to get scooped up. But they picked up Marshawn Lloyd in the third round, another third round pick. They got a linebacker, Tyron Hooper, and then they got another safety out of Oregon. So a couple of big name school safeties, Evan Williams out of Oregon, safety. Again, they went and got the safety out of Georgia. And then the last couple of picks that they had, another safety, offensive tackle, a backup quarterback or a third string quarterback or practice squad quarterback in the 7th round, and then another cornerback out of Penn State. So lots of picks for Green Bay. Addressing, again, needs. The safety position, they went and got that in abundance. The linebacker position, outside linebacker position, and then the offensive lineman. I would have thought they would have went and picked up another offensive lineman. I guess they did. They picked up Jacob Monk, the center out of Duke. So they got 2. To help them with some of that depth on the offensive line. I got to assume all of those guys will make it through training camp and into the rotation for the season. So 6 of the players that were selected from the Aaron Rodgers trade included Edgerrin Cooper, Evan Williams, and Jacob Monk. When you look at all of the picks that Green Bay got off of that Aaron Rodgers trade, certainly they are winning in the deal that they got with the New York Jets. New York Jets haven't even got a full quarter. Heck, they haven't got a full drive out of Aaron Rodgers yet, and they've already given up a lot of depth-earning picks for Green Bay. So this definitely worked out in Green Bay's favor, and everything else is sort of business as usual for Green Bay. They have not had to do a whole lot of changing of their team because they already have a really young squad. This group is going to look pretty good this upcoming year. And then that's going to take us into Chicago, and Chicago did much of what we thought they would do. Look, they're going to get a B+ because they addressed their top needs, or at least their top one need, which was quarterback. We knew Justin Fields was gone, so somebody had to go number 1 in Chicago. Of course, they had been courting Caleb Williams all this time, so it makes perfect sense that they went and got Caleb Williams as their number 1 overall pick. And then the next pick that they had, they went and got Rome Odunze, a big wide receiver, possession wide receiver, to go into a wide receiver room with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. This is going to be a squad to look for. On paper, Chicago really has put it together. Then they went and got an offensive tackle from Yale. They got a punter out of Iowa, who I hear is like a major weapon. Iowa, I'm looking at the highlights of dude. His punting skills are like coffin corner skills. It's crazy how well this guy does his job. But hopefully they're not punting the ball a whole lot this year. They're going to hope. But either way, I'm sure he's making the squad. That's Torrey Taylor, punter out of Iowa. And then the Bears wrapped it up in the 5th round with Austin Booker, a defensive end out of Kansas. I don't know if he's what they needed to fill the spot for that edge position, but at least they're getting someone for their defensive line, potentially to put on the other side of Montez Sweat. So there's a lot that took place for Chicago, but we knew what they were going to do with their first couple of draft picks, and everything else coming after that were to try to fill the other additional holes. But Chicago has significantly improved on their defense last year, so it wasn't that they needed an overhaul this year. It was that they needed direction from the quarterback and offensive side of the ball. And that's what they're hoping that they got in Caleb and Odunze to go with the other weapons that they've added, like Swift and Allen and all those other ones. So I am really looking forward to how Chicago is going to be able to turn what was a potentially very promising season last year that sort of dudded out into potentially a run at the playoffs, or a deep run at the playoffs. I think they have the ability, if Caleb can shorten his learning curve, this is going to be a really exciting year. But Chicago basically got where they were going to get. Green Bay, ton of picks, got a lot of options for folks who are they're going to try to get through their training camp. Minnesota went and got Kirk 2.0 and J.J. McCarthy and picked up some other really valuable help on the defensive side of the ball with Dallas Turner. And then with the Detroit Lions, they spent it on the position that they needed to improve the most, and that was cornerback. Whew, it's been a lot this last week. I tell you, I got a chance to go to the draft. If you haven't already, check out the Instagram. And if you watch us on YouTube, check out YouTube. We got a couple of shorts up of our time spent at the NFL Draft 2024. Had some pretty good seats. It was a really exciting time. Glad I got a chance to do it. And next week, let's see. I don't know what we're going to do next week, but I'll have something for you as we move closer and closer to the start of the NFL season. As always, if you made it to this point in the show, I really appreciate you listening. If you're on YouTube and watching, and if you come back next week, which I hope you do, make sure you've got your bags packed because we are headed north. I'm D-Tron. Peace.
Are you still talking about football?
Yeah, but NFC North.
Then let's talk football.